Drummond with Progressive News. It's Monday, May 11th, 2020. And what I want to talk to you about today, towards the end of my last broadcast, I talked about how I have the solution to reopening the United States, or any country really, but I'm mainly thinking about the United States. And so what I came up with is that, like, essential goods and services, so like schools, meat packaging plants, all become like a little city of their own, right? So like your local school, they set up, like a dormitory type situation, or but where everybody gets their own breathing space. And then they only allow people in who test negative or clearly aren't sick. And however you do that, I don't know. I mean, we may have some failures in the beginning, depending on how people go about that. But and then they're there for 3 months. All the personnel, janitors, principals, vice principals, teachers, all stay in that however they do it. I don't really care how they do it, but they stay there. Because obviously the problem is people coming and going, right? I mean, if you have everybody healthy inside, only a breach could make them sick again. So you have these people come in and they're going to stay, I don't know, whatever, a month, 2 months, 5 months, 1,000 years. I don't really care what it is. The point is everybody's tested before they come in. Obviously, the problem with PPE, gowns and masks and all these things, is that you end up using 1 million of them if you, just tons and tons, if you constantly are worried about coming in contact with the virus. So these people would be, tested once on their way in, and they wouldn't leave until whatever seemed like a good amount of time. Meat packing plants, if we have to co-opt housing and make it part of the zone and, move people elsewhere. I mean, this is a pandemic, right? People are dying. So, but I don't think we should do that. But instead we should bring in temporary housing, like I said before, even tents, in the beginning. Gymnasiums, make a bunch of cubicles big enough to live in, like a room with everything in it, There's a solution for every problem that this causes. So, they can figure it out. Or I can figure it out. If there's a problem, I can always find a solution. But the solution we need is to reopening the economy. Because killing workers to reopen the economy is not an option. I mean, we have people being forced to go back to Amazon, and that's just an example that we see. What about the thousands of other companies, tens of thousands of other companies? Are people dying there too because it's unsafe? I mean, you understand that's murder, right? When you force people, basically by threatening to fire them or whatever, you're murdering people. And sooner or later, I think probably people will say, yeah, let's try these people. This is a classic example of like that Star Trek, the original Star Trek, where the guy was like this guy he was in a Shakespeare troupe. They went around doing, I don't know, can't think of the names, but like Julius Caesar, Othello, I don't know, that's Shakespeare. But anyway, and it turned out he was really like the leader of a whole planet, and at some point he felt like he had to make a decision, and he wiped out half the population of the planet as a solution, and then it turned out that he didn't have to do it. So like, you're guilty if you do something like that. If you decide to do something that gets people killed, knowingly especially, obviously. So people who run warehouses and stuff, and they're pressuring people to come back and work, and people start dying, they start getting sick. This is really, really, really evil stuff. And if you don't believe in evil, it's just really mean. And I don't care what your good intentions are. Trump with his good intentions, oh well, more people will die from the economy. Yeah, but you didn't do it. You didn't cause the economy to crash. And people are going to resist in massive numbers. And yes, it is up to the government to provide us with, I've been suffering without money forever, right? For like since 2004. I was the working poor till 2012, and then I lost my income altogether. Yeah, I managed to survive, but why should people who work all their lives have to do that? Anyway, I'm not going to get into that. So that's one part of the solution, right? And I can go. I always think it's fun, and it's funny. You gotta find ways to enjoy yourself, right? So, the other part is something I've been thinking of just recently, and just let me have a drink here. And I think we need to form networks. They could be mirrored by social networks, but I think we should have COVID-free networks. So like, we set up a set of rules for everybody in our network, like you can't have contact. Short of going to the grocery store and things like that, and you wear a mask, and you avoid people, you use social distancing, mask and gloves, and we have to trust people to do that if they want to be in our network. And we form a network where everybody understands the rules that keep us all safe. No sneaking off and having sex with somebody who is outside of the network and could possibly have the virus. Otherwise, you would have to re-enter the network. So everybody in the network it's kind of like the situation with uh, people who are in the, whatever it is. It could even be a shop where they all stay together. I mean, for the network, not for the shop's too small. I mean, the one I was talking about before is for big places where people would actually live there. But then outside, we need to form these networks, and so like, okay, well, like me, I'm COVID free, and I don't think I could get it doing what I do. So I always wear a mask, I always wear gloves, and I have like hundreds, and if you need help, like if somebody in your network needed help, I could show them where to get gloves. I just buy these gloves that people use at McDonald's or I think I see them using them at places like Subway. They're just plastic gloves, completely see-through. You can take them on, put them on and take them off really easily, which is important because you don't want to touch them. Because if you've been handling stuff at the grocery store, so I have a set of rules. I could give you them. That, so like when, obviously anything you handle with the gloves after you might have gotten contaminated would have to be decontaminated. Everything from the store needs to either sit, I do it 5 days. Technically you could probably do it 3. I wouldn't do it in less than 4. You have it set and you don't touch it, because the guy who puts the stuff on the shelves could be sick and not even know it. He could be asymptomatic, right? So after your gloves get contaminated when you're in the store, let's just assume every time you go to the store your gloves get contaminated. If you manage not to get too close to anybody, which probably won't happen, then your mask and I wear sunglasses in the store to cover my eyes really well. They go all the way around my head practically, and I consider them to be contaminated, and I don't touch them till I get home. The mask I take on and off with my gloves from the front. I never touch the inside, but I'm not going to wear the mask while I drive. I mean, that's just asking too much. So I put it back on every time I go into, because I go into like 5 stores when I go shopping, because I haven't shopped in like weeks and weeks and weeks, or whatever. I want to get all this certain kinds of stuff. So, people who are willing to do that could be in your network. I mean, I'm talking about your best friends and stuff, I'm not talking about anybody else. So these are people who you want to be able to have over to your house. You want to be able to go over to their house. And you want to set up a network where all the people in your network are following all the rules and very unlikely to get sick. And, you just want some company from time to time or something like that. I think it could be done. I think it's workable. It's complicated for sure. But hey, if you're starving for company, maybe what about somebody you want to have sex with, or a love affair, or romance, or whatever, if you could have a network, they could be in your network. you could see them on a regular basis. As long as everybody followed the rules, I think that you could have a COVID-free network. Okay. So anyway. Alright, so that's really, generally speaking, what I think would need to be done. And obviously it wouldn't save everybody, but it would save everybody in the networks that you were in, the COVID-free networks, and it would save everybody who was working or teaching or a student or a member of any other kind of institution where a whole bunch of people are all, obviously the institution would have to be a major part of your life for you to be there. So it would be something like that, where you were a teacher or a student or you were a meat packer or whatever, and you would actually live there for months at a time. Or weeks, I don't know, you guys figure it out. You guys can figure it out. I don't have to do everything here. Now, another thing about COVID is this business about where it originated. And I gotta tell you, don't trust anybody. And don't ever, people are going to make you think that they're authoritative. If a major news outlet puts out a show on it, then obviously they're saying they're authoritative, right? So they may say, oh, we don't really know, and oh, this may be a theory and that, but what they're saying is that, they'll tell you the first thing that they want you to believe up front, and then talk about everything else kind of secondary. So this is German news, and this guy's a douchebag, and he's got this stupid, this is Germans, they must know what they're talking about, right?
Questions asked Science Code.
Germany is kept from getting overrun with the virus, right? Not necessarily. But this sounds kind of authoritative, and it's bullshit for the most part, but let's go ahead and watch it.
Where did it all start? Most scientists say the novel coronavirus came from nature, but there remain gaps in our knowledge about its precise origin. Some have chosen to fill those gaps with conspiracy theories, even calling COVID-19 a man-made disease. In many ways, what we don't know about the coronavirus may be hurting our efforts to contain it. As the death toll reaches over 284,000 across the globe, the world is still waiting for the full story. Welcome to this COVID-19 special. I'm Rob Watts in Berlin. It's nice to have you along with us. So, where did the new coronavirus actually come from?
Okay, this guy doesn't know. The expert or experts, I think he only talks to one girl, which makes it easy, right, for him to lie. They don't know. But there are some things that you can absolutely know, okay? Because they're logical, reasonable, they're easy to figure out.
Scientists haven't reached a conclusive answer on that, and that's one reason why conspiracy theories and misinformation have been able to run rampant.
So, of course, everybody who doesn't agree with what him and his experts say are conspiracy theories, right? Which is nonsense. And I can tell you one thing that they're going to say is that, first of all, they don't even know how many COVID-19s there are. They're saying that this one's different in the United States from the one in Europe now. Or if you haven't heard that, you will. And they're saying the one in Europe is different from the one in China. Actually, they're only saying that the one in Europe is different from the one in China. But I guarantee you they're going to say that the one in the United States is different too, because the one in the United States is far more, I don't know that it's far more deadly, but I think it is, and it's far more infectious, contagious. Now, it may be about the same as the one in Britain. And you know, you gotta wonder about coincidences, because, and here I'm casting aspersions on China, but the fact is if it's far more deadly in Britain than the United States, you gotta wonder if that's by design. Now, the main thing I wanted to say right here is, they say, you'll hear this guy say, well, no, it can't have come from a lab, because you'd see marks. Well, there's no such things as marks on genetic sequencing. There's markers, which is just saying that, that part of the genome is the same in this particular case as it is in another, and they call that a genetic marker. So if you get a series 10,000, I'm not sure how many chromosomes, DNA, whatever, I don't know how many there are, I know there's a lot, but they call that a genetic marker. So, but here's the thing, I think it's like 94% of our DNA and every genetic organism on the planet is the same. So like you have, I think they use the example of a frog usually. So you have a frog, its DNA is exactly the same as human, right up to, like, I think it's 94%. You can correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I'm not very good at keeping all these statistics in my head, but I try. So, and there's no such thing as a mark. When you genetically manipulate DNA, it doesn't leave like a mark, because the thing replicates over and over again. If there were a mark left from where you actually replaced a gene or something, it would go away in the next group when it's split. It's ridiculous what they say, and they say it like it's just so obvious.
Business, huh?
It would have marks.
Get some video before they close.
And it wouldn't have a marker either. Just because it was manipulated or it occurred naturally, it would look exactly the same.
Where's Scott at?
It wouldn't look any different. You could theorize about it all day, but you could never say it was one or the other.
Video?
And so,
Get your...
would...
Thanks. Appreciate it. So what are you going to do?
Would they ever do that? Would they ever genetically manipulate something to do that? I have to say they would. I have to say military scientists would, because they want the deadliest, just absolutely deadliest. But God, you hate to even think about that. But maybe we should think about that, you know? You know, do you ever ask yourself, or do you ever ask your friends, what are they doing at Fort Detrick, or here or there? I mean, if this just escaped from a lab, which is possible, God, these scam people on the phone, they call like 30 times a day. It's just absolutely disgusting. But I have a solution for that too. Just take the batteries out of the phone. Okay. I won't have any more of those kind of interruptions. So you know, I think it's very important to ask that question. You know, who's playing with these viruses? And this was an American. Well, let's just go ahead and watch some more.
With much of the world still in the grips of COVID-19, the story of how the virus originated remains a mystery. Beijing says it emerged from a seafood market in Wuhan. But early cases with no apparent connection to the market have cast doubt on that claim. One institution that's attracted a lot of attention is the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Scientists there had been analysing specimens of coronavirus found in bats. This has given rise to several theories.
And a couple of things come to mind here. If it was in animals, they'd get sick too. You know, we talk about asymptomatic, but I mean, people are also really careful around animals. So in markets and stuff, they will often, I would think, wash their hands after they handle animals or come in like any kind of serious contact with them. And then also, it would be very hard to catch it from an animal because the virus doesn't survive at all on fur, on hair. It has like a very short period that it would survive. And keep in mind that even if you can catch it from an asymptomatic animal or a human being or whatever, you're not likely to, because if they're not coughing, sneezing, throwing up, bleeding all over you, then the chances are much lower. I mean, I would much rather cross paths with an asymptomatic person than somebody who's blowing snot across the room, right? All these things are important.
One is that sloppy biosecurity caused the virus to be released accidentally.
Yeah, and do they mention the fact that the United States, because this is an American lab, don't get it wrong. This lab was fully funded to the tune of like $150 million from a New York-based conservative organization. These people worked for the United States. They were doing work that is frowned upon in the United States. And they had COVID-19 in there. They say they found it in bats, but really? There were no bats at the market, by the way, the whatever you call it, market, wet market. They've already decided that.
I'll put that up on YouTube and tell everybody he's feeling sorry for himself. Yeah. That's the guy right there. He's feeling sorry for himself.
Another is that it was engineered in the lab, a notion the scientific community firmly rejects.
How long was this place
Really?
open?
Really, that the whole scientific community rejects the idea that it was somehow manipulated, genetically manipulated. That's a pretty big claim. I find that highly doubtful.
Somebody took their time doing that one, huh?
My view is very clear. It did not come from the Wuhan.
Now, would you trust this guy with your child? I mean, where do we get these guys? Ian Jones, virologist, University of Reading. Who is he?
BS.
We don't know. I don't know if I even
And the
care.
reason for that is that the genetic sequence of the virus has been determined, and it's quite clearly an animal virus. If it had been an engineered virus, it would have some marks which showed the points at which engineering...
Some marks. Come on, people. Is anybody buying this bullshit? I mean, I think they pulled him out of a pub at 6 p.m. after having 10 or 12 pints.
had been done, but that is not the case.
Many experts believe the virus originated in bats and may have...
And I think that bats are probably clean and do not carry a lot of viruses. I mean, they're certainly able to survive them. They pretty much thrive until you... Matter of fact, they're probably going to be all that's left after we wipe out the entire planet. The only things that live in caves are probably going to be left in the air. I don't know, but even if they are like the source of the virus, wouldn't that be poetic justice, right? After we've wiped out everything on the planet, the stuff that lives in caves comes back and kills human beings. Maybe that's why vampires are so associated with vampire bats, right?
jumped to humans via an intermediary host, possibly a pangolin. Further questions have also arisen.
Now I gotta wonder, how's a bat going to bite a pangolin? I mean, this thing is armor plated. Is it gonna bite it on the ear, bite it on the nose? And would bats even try to bite a pangolin? I've never seen any documentaries where they show bats attacking pangolins.
As reports suggest the virus was already spreading in Europe in December, weeks earlier than previously believed. French doctors discovered a COVID-19 case dating from December 27th in a man hospitalized near Paris. It's the earliest identified infection outside China. This shift in the timeline of the pandemic could shape the course of medical investigations.
And now, the other day, I saw this thing where they have like some people in like Santa Clara, California. It's like where I grew up, in San Jose, right next door, who were positive with this in August or something. So what the fuck's going on here? And I've already alluded to the fact that what I caught when I was in jail, which was January 2019. I think. Yeah, January 2000, December, January, February. I mean, I was sick for 2 months. 2 months. I was like coughing and wheezing. What was that? What was going around in jails then? You know, maybe this thing took a long time in humans to finally, maybe it mutated there. Maybe it was let loose. I wonder if they figured out how to genetically encode a virus so that it mutates. I wonder if they can do that. I guess I shouldn't give them any ideas, right? I mean, my God, you could take a cold virus or whatever, something that everybody gets, and you could genetically manipulate it to become, like, say you could make it so in a year it would turn into something horrible like Ebola or something. Man, that would be nasty, huh? So it gets all throughout, because, you know, we do have these antibody tests that everybody is claiming shows that this thing's been around for ages, and that they estimated that 80% of, like, LA County has already had the COVID-19. Now, I don't put a lot of stock in that. But what if it's true? What if the antibody tests are accurate? Which I don't understand exactly. I mean, I understand as much as anybody else about antibody tests. I understand about probably a little more, unless you saw the same videos I saw that are about how, you know, antibodies come out and they chomp, 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 and then they somehow signal for all these enzymes to come out and attack. And so I get that, how accurate it is. I mean, could one kind of antibody and enzymes, or whatever they are, be the same for multiple viruses, right? So could you get a positive antibody test to where it says you had COVID even though you had something else? You know, that's my big concern with the antibody tests. I believe that's what's happening. Am I right? I don't know. But it's possible. But we need to find these things out. But they're not talking about all the cases that are coming up that are way earlier than December, right?
So
they're just talking about a few that were in December, and those are easily in the mind of the watcher, the person watching this video. Anybody could, like, say, oh, well, it's so close, it could have been this, could have been that. People could have been traveling from China and they could have caught it right then, you know. Or maybe not. But probably not. By the way that they're presenting it, probably not. On the other hand, you could get somebody, so this video is totally biased. You could get somebody who looked at these cases and evidence that the virus has been around for a while. Maybe it mutated is what made it so deadly. And they could be just as believable as these guys.
But this gives us a whole new picture on everything. And yes, of course, it would be great if all countries who have unspecified cases of pneumonia in the recent months, and even in December and even in November, would check them against COVID-19.
Further investigation in China may eventually establish the source of the outbreak. But Beijing is yet to allow such a probe, meaning key questions could remain.
And I want to make it clear that I did see a video that said that people from the Wuhan Institute of Virology And I think it said they were Americans, because there always were Americans there. Matter of fact, one of the first person I saw on Democracy Now! Was a lady who worked there, who insisted they couldn't have let it loose, right? Yeah. Give me a break. She's going to be an unbiased, witness, right? No. She's working there. She's on the inside where Americans shouldn't be, right? Probably responsible for the lax conditions that whoever it was. And who was it who went there exactly and said that there were lax conditions? What exactly did they have to say? What lax conditions? See, nobody's really talking, which tells you right now that there's a big problem. If everybody's scared, everybody's pointing fingers, playing the blame game, then you know there's a big problem.
Been unanswered for quite some time.
And I say they already know. They just don't want to say. I mean, how about we go to China and be nice and say, we want to know what happened. And we get the names of every single person who worked in this lab, and we find out who did get sick, who didn't get sick. We test them. They can't have just disappeared off the face of the planet, right? They got to be somewhere. And if they did disappear, then there's something else we got to find out. What happened to them? And we find out if there were any Americans in the lab, and who are they, and how have they tested, and when they got sick or didn't get sick, and how they might have caught it if they test positive. Nobody's doing any of this stuff. And it's not because China is secretive. I mean, I think they've already done this. And if they have, we need to have that information. I mean, in fact, it was practically our lab anyway. So why shouldn't they help us? And if people like you and me, the people, because you know what? China respects the people. Its leaders, maybe not. But I think a lot of people in China and a lot of leaders in China do respect the American people. Their representatives, not so much. But I think for our sakes, they would make this information public. I'll bet you if I was able to walk into whatever his name is, Jinping or whatever office right now, he would say, yes, I'd be glad to share that information or get that information, arrange for it to be shared with you. I mean, it's not like I have anything against China. It's just Trump who seems to have a problem with China. Trump and a few of his friends. I mean, I assume that it just depends on how much money you're getting off of China, right? So Trump maybe doesn't, and his friends maybe don't make a lot of money off of China. Democratic establishment seems well entrenched with the Chinese. They enabled them to steal all kinds of stuff from us, and they continue to steal. I mean, the state's going to continue to act like the state, right? People may be one thing, and there may be a difference of opinion amongst their representatives, but it's always going to behave like the state. They're always going to try and spy and steal and all this stuff. And of course, we need to put an end to that. people need to have a right to benefit, or maybe they don't. Maybe we should share all technology, but as long as we're pointing guns at each other, that's probably not going to happen. So we need to end the warfare and start the love affair between countries, and where we share information and we all work for the benefit of the planet. You know, I was going to say mankind, but God, shouldn't we think about the planet a little bit and all the other species?
Well, let's speak to Dr. Philippa Lentsos, who's a researcher in biological threats working at King.
Okay, prepare for a mountain of bullshit.
College London. How does this case in France fit in with the existing timeline we've got for the development of coronavirus?
Hi, Rob. It's good to be with you. Well,
So you see how, first of all, they pick a pretty girl, so you're going to be biased towards her immediately. Well, let me tell you something that I've discovered. Beautiful girls and evil often go together. I mean, anything to pull people in. But why do they just pick this one case in France? Are you sure that's the only case that they've come up with? No, they pick it because it's close to the same time that it came out in Wuhan. And yeah, anybody can try and guess how it came and when and everything. But she's going to say that basically she's just going to everything she says is going to muddy the waters. Matter of fact, I'm tempted not to even show you what she has to say, but
French case brings the first case known outside of China forward by a couple of weeks. So it shows that the virus was spreading earlier than we originally thought. But the index case, or the very first reported case in China, was in early December, so that doesn't directly impact on how we view the origin timeline.
So can we try and get to the bottom of what we do actually know so far? What do we know for sure?
This guy's a smeghead, right? He's a rimmer. You ever watch Red Dwarf? Look at this snotty little guy. I don't even know why. And his show is just nonsense.
Sure.
Well, we don't know a lot for sure. We don't know with any certainty how the pandemic started, but there are several possibilities. Jumping from bats to people via pancreas.
We may not, but there are probably people who do. In the United States and in China, both, and in Europe. And probably in Europe. You know, I like to remind people that all the bad stuff in the world originated in Europe. I mean, the Chinese have always been a victim of Europe, of the British mainly, and the United States after that, Japanese. You know, the reason we had World War II with them is because we were stepping all over their toes, and they decided to fight back, and then they lost, right? Got their asses kicked. That's about the only thing the United States is really good at, is killing. I mean, yeah, Germany was really good at. See, and all that comes from Europe. Racism, massive in Europe. It's no wonder it you know, these things like racism and hatred, they're like the worst virus in the world.
But there are also other theories, and we simply just don't know for sure.
Where do we think that happened, though, that transferal from animal to human?
That transferal from animal to human. Maybe it transferred from human to animal first. I mean, this is nonsense. Let's just jump ahead to about here. We'll watch the end.
Then accessed. Another possibility is that an infection occurred when researchers were out in the field collecting viruses from bats deep inside mountain caves. So there are a number of possibilities, and these are still very much open questions.
Seems to me like the bat thing is more of a conspiracy theory than that it came out of or that it was even a manipulated, genetically created in the lab. Because, those two are on par, I believe, as conspiracy theories. And the fact is no matter how much you watch, they're never really going to show any real compelling information that it did come from bats.
Yeah, there's a lot of possibilities to be discounted. Thank you very much for your insight, Dr. Philippa.
Oh, and yeah, lots and lots of possibilities. Nobody seems to know what's going on, and yet at the same time, they're going to tell you what's going on. They're going to really tell you that, it came from bats, basically, is what they're going to say. That it went through the wet market or whatever.
Lentsos from King's College London.
And you know what? All these people, all they're interested in is their grants and their money, and they've all got lots. They lead cushy lives compared to most of us. Maybe some of them are dedicated. Maybe a lot of them are driven. But the one thing I see, the one common denominator is they're very much driven by money.
Well, now it's your chance to ask the questions. Our science correspondent, Derek Williams, has
Gee, I never got to ask a question.
been busy answering the queries you've been sending us here at DW. Please do keep them coming.
How does COVID-19 affect...
Oh, we got the expert coming back. Well, I can answer this, is that they've found COVID all through the organs and getting to the heart. That's can't be good for the brain. Now, have they found COVID in the cranial cavity?
the brain?
We've all heard by now about the most common COVID-19 symptoms: fever, a dry cough, fatigue. But a range of other symptoms can occur also, some of them involving the brain and central nervous system. That's not surprising, really. Other respiratory infections can also cause neurological symptoms. A study from the outbreak in Wuhan found that at one point, around 1 in 3 COVID-19 patients who arrived at a hospital there had neurological problems. Other studies show that neurological symptoms are far from rare. They range from dizziness, headaches, and impaired consciousness to the impairment of taste, smell, and vision.
Right, but think about it. They can decide whether the virus is in the brain, whether it's arrived in the brain. So one way for sure that it could arrive in the brain is through the blood, right? So tell us, unless you just don't want to tell us, did they find coronavirus in people's brains? I saw a thing on autopsies on people who definitely had the virus the other day, and I didn't catch that actually. I just saw that there was a video. Maybe I'll have a look real quick, see if I can find it. Okay, so I found a number of different things. I'm going to share them with you.
What are the most common symptoms of COVID? Fever, cough, shortness of breath. It's also common to have body aches. But COVID-19 is sometimes more than just a respiratory disease, or sometimes not a respiratory disease at all. It can mimic just about any illness. Sometimes it looks like a common cold. Sometimes it looks like influenza. Sometimes it looks like a stomach bug with belly pain, diarrhea, maybe some nausea, vomiting, loss of appetite. It can cause pink eye, a runny nose, loss of taste and smell, sometimes even whole body rashes or areas of swelling and redness of the skin in just a few spots. It's also kidney damage, heart damage. This is a section of a heart of a patient who had severe COVID disease. This patient had inflamed lungs with ARDS and tiny clots in his lungs, and that made it hard for his right ventricle to pump blood to his lungs. And that's what caused his right ventricle to weaken and become dilated. So, like I mentioned, severe disease is causing blood clots to form in a lot of patients. When blood clots are found in the lungs, they're called pulmonary emboli. Some COVID patients have presented with a stroke as a result of having blood clots in their brain. COVID has also presented in other ways, sometimes with seizures, also Guillain-Barré syndrome. This makes it incredibly difficult to diagnose and even harder to treat. This disease can present in so many ways. There's never been a disease in the history of mankind that's presented in so many different ways. When it comes to how this virus invades our body and causes disease, there are some things we know, some things we think we know, and then some things we just don't know. How about we start with what we know? When the virus lands in our eyes, nose, or mouth, or sometimes when we inhale it into our lungs, the spike proteins of the virus bind to the ACE2 receptor on the surface of certain cells, and that's how it gains entry. These ACE2 receptors are found in many different parts of the body. Once the virus gains entry, not only does it make millions of copies of itself, but it also alters the cell's ability to call for help. It's like the cells that get infected, they can't call the police, at least not initially. Once the virus is deeply embedded in our body, it begins to cause more severe disease. This is where direct attack on other organs that have ACE2 receptors can occur, including heart muscle, kidneys, blood vessels, liver, and the brain. Early findings, including those from multiple autopsy and biopsy reports, show that viral particles can be found not only in the nasal passages and throat, but also in tears, stool, kidneys, liver, pancreas, and the heart. One case report found evidence of viral particles in the CSF, meaning the cerebrospinal fluid. That's the fluid around the brain. The patient ended up having meningitis. Oh, I forgot to mention that one earlier.
Okay, so they did find coronavirus in the brain, in the cerebral fluid. So that was a question I had earlier, and it's answered here. Always look to the people who cut up the dead people. Find out what they have to say. I remember seeing a report not too long, within the last 5 years, about how people who perform autopsies were finding alarming amounts of fungus in people's chest cavities. I was like, oh my God. And for all the people out there who, till now, these are conspiracy theorists who claim that, oh, it's just a bad flu like Bolsonaro of Brazil. Idiots, morons, dipshits, pieces of shit, really is what they are. I even had somebody who, in the very beginning of this, tried to tell me that, oh yeah, this isn't any worse than the flu, and how in Kentucky it's not going to be bad, and all this bullshit. If you're watching this right now, any of you, I'm sure your stomach is churning. And no, that's not coronavirus, that's your guilt, okay, for spreading such nonsense, even though we knew the death rate was like 4%. But I didn't realize this. The people who end up on ventilators, nearly half of them die. Typically, about half of patients who go on ventilators do not survive. and that COVID-19 patients seem to do even worse on mechanical ventilation. And I was thinking about this the other day. I was thinking, I wouldn't want them to put me on a ventilator. I would want them to make me stand up and walk around as much as possible and remain as, it's like they say, well, the people who survived are the ones who kept their eyes open, who stayed alert. You've got to fight anything, no matter what it is, how badly you're injured or how sick you are. You got to fight. You got to fight to stay up and around and keep moving. Man, doctors will kill you. I hate to tell you this, but, people go to hospitals more often than not to die. And I'm not saying don't get medical help, because you can't get prescriptions, you can't get, they hold us hostage. One of my pet peeves in one of my groups is called, it's about medical malpractice and how it's encouraged really in our for-profit medical system, especially for the poor, less money you have. You are your own doctor. And if you think you're stupid, then go ahead and listen to your doctor. But if you think you've got an even modicum of common sense, insist that they do nothing that you don't approve of, right? And question everything that they tell you. Researchers found even more alarming outcomes recently in New York City. Analyzing data from 12 New York hospitals, they found out that 320 patients put on ventilators, 282 died. One in 9 survived. Oh my God. And this guy's an idiot. This guy's fucking brilliant. And he's going to talk about that. But I want to check this out too real quick.
We begin with a stunning revelation from Santa Clara County tonight. An autopsy reveals the first COVID-19 related death happened much earlier than previously thought. The county initially said the first corona-related fatality was on March 9th. Now we're learning it was a full month earlier, February 6th. 2 more autopsies from February 17th and March 6th also came back positive for COVID-19. The county says 3 people died at home during a time when there was very limited testing available through the CDC.
So there's an interesting little fact, right? Factoid.
This virus can also cause meningitis, which is inflammation of the membranes that encapsulate the brain and spinal cord. And here is an electron microscopic picture of the virus in kidney cells. And to give you perspective, 1 nanometer is 1/10,000,000th the size of a centimeter. The red arrows point to the virus, and the green arrows point to the spikes of the virus. And the virus altogether is about 65 nanometers in diameter. So the virus is sometimes going to all these different organs by means of attaching to the ACE2 receptors that are there. But that's not even the whole story. Because in some cases, by the time the body's immune system figures out that the body's being invaded, it's like unleashing the military to stomp out the virus. And in that process, there's a ton of collateral damage. This is what we refer to as the cytokine storm. RANTES is a chemokine that is thought to play a large role in the COVID-19 cytokine storm, which binds to the CCR5 receptors on CD4 and CD8 T lymphocytes, essentially propagating further inflammation and possibly propagating further clotting. When the virus gets into the alveolar cells, meaning the tiny little air sacs within the lungs, it makes a ton of copies of itself, and then it goes on to invade more cells. The alveoli's next door neighbor is, guess who? Yeah, the thinnest blood vessels in your body, the capillaries. So the lining of those capillaries is called endothelium, which also have ACE2 receptors. And once the virus invades those capillaries, boy oh boy, that's when the immune system gets triggered AF, as in PAF. PAF stands for platelet activating factor, also known as acetylglycerol ether phosphorylcholine, whatever. But this PAF is a big deal because it's a potent phospholipid activator. So what does that mean? It means that it serves as the trigger for the onslaught of inflammation and clotting. And early autopsy results are also showing widely scattered clots in multiple organs. In one study from the Netherlands, 1/3 of hospitalized patients with COVID-19 got clots despite already being on a prophylactic dose of blood thinner. And the real number is likely higher than that because I promise you, most doctors are not looking for clots in COVID patients until recently. So not only are you getting the inflammation with the cytokine storm, but you're also forming blood clots that can travel to other parts of the body and cause major blockages, effectively damaging those organs. So wait a minute, doc. You're telling me that this can cause organ damage by 1, directly attacking organs by their ACE2 receptors? Yeah. 2, indirectly attacking organs by way of collateral damage through the cytokine storm? Yeah. 3, indirectly cause damage to organs by means of blood clots? Yep. 4, indirectly cause organ damage by low oxygen levels or improper ventilator settings or side effects from the medications that we give? Yeah. And back to the whole blood clot thing. If you saw my video on blood clots in COVID patients, you'll know that antiphospholipid antibody syndrome, or APS, that just might be the link to explain why so many COVID patients are getting blood clots, like what this autopsy showed in the lungs with blood clots here. Not only did it have blood clots, but these lungs are inflamed and showed findings consistent with ARDS when it was looked at underneath the microscope. These lungs were heavy, filled with fluid, and much stiffer than normal lungs. All these factors make it hard for the lungs to move air in and out. It makes it hard to get oxygen from that air into the blood. And this was another autopsy here where they sliced up small pieces of lung and looked at it underneath the microscope. These are tiny little blood clots within the lung capillaries. And the lining of these lung capillaries is called the endothelium. And this endothelium is destroyed by the virus and by inflammation. This is a picture of the endothelial cells undergoing apoptosis. So apoptosis is a process where the cell programs itself to die, which is what sometimes happens when a cell gets infected. And endothelial cells are more vulnerable to dying in people with pre-existing endothelial dysfunction, which is more often associated with being a male, being a smoker, having high blood pressure, having diabetes, having obesity. And if all these sound familiar, maybe that's because these are all the associated risk factors for worse outcomes in COVID-19. But let's get back to blood clots, because these blood clots can form and or travel to other parts of the body. When blood clots travel to the toes and cause blockages in blood flow there, meaning ischemia or infarction, that can cause gangrene there. And lots of times patients with gangrene require amputation. So here's a picture of what we call COVID toes. And it doesn't just affect toes, it also affects other areas of skin. This is a picture of something we call purpura, which results of capillaries bursting open, which is a result of the clots that are forming there. So is antiphospholipid antibody syndrome, or APS, is that the cause of all these blood clots in patients with severe COVID? Maybe. It's a tricky diagnosis. Some patients with APS have what's called catastrophic APS, or CAPS, CAPS. With CAPS, these patients can have strokes, seizures, heart attacks, kidney failure, ARDS, skin changes like the ones I mentioned earlier in this video. So this begs the question, is this what's going on in patients with severe COVID-19?
Okay, are you as grossed out as I am now? I mean, this stuff is sickening. Whoever said this is the flu, give me a break. When did you ever see your ass explode because of the flu?
It sure does look like it. Viral infectious diseases, particularly those of the respiratory tract, have been reported as being the triggers for CAPS. The pathogenesis is complex, and it might involve the activation of toll-like receptor 4, TLR4, which triggers a cytokine storm. followed by alterations to the endothelium of lung capillaries, which serves as the trigger for inducing the cytokine storm. When you take a step back and think about it, there aren't a lot of diseases that cause clots to form in the arteries. Usually, it's when we have plaques in our arteries, and then those plaques rupture and they travel downstream and cause a blockage. This is what happens when we have a heart attack. When someone has atrial fibrillation, the atria are fibrillating so quickly, meaning they're quivering. When this happens, the pool of blood sitting there becomes stagnant, and that's why people with atrial fibrillation are at higher risk of developing clots there. That clot can then travel to other organs and cause a blockage of blood flow there. When it goes to the brain, it can cause a stroke. When it goes to the leg, it can cause gangrene. When it goes to the arteries of the gut, it can cause mesenteric ischemia or infarction, where the gut tissue can then die off. There's various factors that increase the risk of developing arterial thrombosis, meaning arterial clots. Classically, the cardiovascular dependent risk factors implicated in clotting have been high blood pressure, meaning hypertension, high levels of cholesterol, smoking, diabetes, age, chemotherapy, and the degree of infection. So all of these contribute toward developing arterial thrombosis. You know what? These same risk factors also sound a lot like the same risk factors for people who have severe COVID disease. Yeah, so it seems like there's some correlation there. And you know something else? There's really only one other medical condition that is well known to cause clots in both the veins and arteries, and that's APS. The other medical conditions that are known to cause clots, such as factor V Leiden, prothrombin gene mutation, heparin-induced thrombotic thrombocytopenia, or HIT for short. Also other conditions like PNH, which is paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria. These conditions don't really cause clots to form in arteries. The blood clots that form in these conditions almost always form clots in veins. But with APS, they often form clots in both, or at least are more likely to form clots in arteries. When you combine that knowledge with what we saw just published in the New England Journal of Medicine, with these patients having COVID-19 and developing blood clots in their arteries, and all of them being positive for antiphospholipid antibodies, it really makes you wonder if this is the reason that's causing some COVID patients to die. So we'll need more studies looking into these, and I'm going to make a video where I deep dive into APS and CAPS, and I'm going to discuss how we make that diagnosis, because it is a tricky diagnosis, but also I'll talk about how we treat it. Part of the reason why it can be tricky is because it can be confused with something called DIC, or disseminated intravascular coagulation, but they're not the same thing. See, a lot of patients with severe COVID-19 have certain labs that resemble DIC, such as increased PT-INR, increased PTT, decreased levels of platelets. But the reason why these COVID patients who develop clots in the study I mentioned earlier, the reason why they don't have DIC is actually two reasons. One, they weren't having extensive bleeding, and two, they didn't have low fibrinogen levels. And if it's truly DIC, you'd have both of these things. Anyway, you can probably glean from this video why it's so hard for doctors to figure out what is going on with the virus. Between the variable ways this disease can present in different patients and the different ways that organs can suffer damage, yeah, this is really, really, really complicated. And we still are just scratching the surface with just how much we know about it. There's so many pieces of the puzzle that we're still putting together, but at least it's starting to form a picture. Thanks for watching this video.
Okay, so I would strongly suggest that you go to this guy's channel. Okay, this isn't a very good example. Go to this guy's channel and subscribe.
And Dr. Yogi that'll like.
And check out his...
What happened?
Hello. Is this starting? Yes. Starting now. Jesse, Mary Lou, Judy, Tasha. Okay, welcome everyone. Can you hear all of us?
Hello, hello. Good evening, everyone.
Hello.
Okay, welcome. A lot of people. Chris O'Neill, Ibiana, Reddy, Karen. Subject. Okay. Well, everyone, welcome to tonight's COVID Q&A live stream. Happy Mother's Day to everyone out there who are mothers. And this Mother's Day is a special.
So I will be interested in seeing what he was talking about, doing a video on how to treat these things. And I will definitely come back once I've seen it and share it with you and share highlights from it. This is why you don't listen to these people, okay? The only reason you listen to these people is to find out what they're not telling you. So it's kind of like, well, look at the holes, you know? I mean, they're like, what do you have on your window? You have window, to keep all the insects out. Mental block. My God, total mental block. But, so, you've got a screen on your window, and what they're telling you is the screen, but then you need to look carefully for the holes in the screen, because the holes are what matter, right? The holes are where those insects are going to get in and get you, because they're nonsense. The mainstream media worldwide, and I hate to say it, but here on the internet, they've taken over, and you'll notice that a lot of the videos, or I notice, like I went and did a search. I think I've already closed the window. Yeah, I have. So I know I saw a video in my subscriptions, right? If you click on who you're subscribed to. So like if I do So I know within the last 2 days I have opened up this window and seen something on autopsies. This was like what autopsies are revealing about coronavirus. Okay? So now I went back 7 days in those subscriptions, and I simply did a search. Right? It brings up this window, which you can't see, but anyway, and put in autopsy. Because I couldn't remember whether, I think it was autopsies. Anyway, that video's gone from my subscriptions, which means somebody deleted it or they marked it private. Well, no, they would have had to delete it, because it would still show up, I think, in my videos, even if they'd made it private. But I find a lot of videos that I run across disappear. And I have to wonder, is that because Google or YouTube, which I think is the same thing actually, yeah it is, are deleting them? Yeah, it is. And why? Because they don't want you to see them. Oh, maybe they've got some altruistic reason. That means that they believe that they've got a good reason to delete them. Or would they just like to believe that? that they've got a good reason? Or do they have a bad reason? It's going to be hard for us to say, really. Anyway, I'm sure you're as sick to your stomach as I am after all of this. Really scary stuff, right? Really scary. And what if it mutates again? They say it already mutated, or that what's in the United States is far more contagious. I'm guessing even more deadly, because a lot of other countries have much better outcomes and they're not any better at stopping it than we are. So is it running around the world mutating? Are we going to end up with an Ebola type of virus by the time it gets done mutating? Something in me says we might. When it comes back in fall, or if it lasts through the summer, whatever. Things could get worse before they get better. I wonder sometimes if maybe it's better off to be, obviously, to survive and come back out the other side. And would a less dangerous version of an earlier, before mutations, would that maybe be a vaccine? I mean, that's what all vaccines are, right? Or most of them. They're survivable copies of a virus or bacteria or whatever. And then after that, you're immune to the worst, the worst ones. I don't know. It's early yet. We'll see what happens. But we do have to work together to try and figure this out. So this is Martin Drummond. And I hope you have a nice week. And try not to let this bother you too much, but at the same time, keep it in mind. And, gosh, let's hope for better days, right? And I'm going to leave you with one of my songs.
Spend my life and I can't understand why no one will listen or lend me a hand. It's alright. It's alright. It's not hard to see why I am how I am.
Oh, and I do want to remind you, please like my videos and subscribe to my channel, and make sure that when you do subscribe, let's see if I can. Yeah, so when you find one of my videos, click on Progressive News. Make sure that you, well, I'll show you somebody else's so that I can show you. Make sure you click the subscribe button and that you click on all.
Around me, don't give a damn, it's alright. It's alright. Well, I'm going home. No place to roam, it's alright. It's alright. It's alright. It's alright. People care, and it's all too clear that they're overwhelmed by all that they hear. And that's right. That's right. They hold on so hard to what they hold dear, and they can't see the truth through all that they feel. That's right. That's right. Well, it's coming home with no place to roam. That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. There's not enough time to make you understand why you can't have it all and still make a stand. That's right. That's right. And just try to go to that place in your mind where you feel real safe and you leave fear behind. That's right. It's alright. Well, we're coming home, and there's no place like home. It's alright. It's alright. It's alright. It's alright. It's not hard to see why I am how I am when the people around me don't give a damn. It's alright. It's alright. Well, I'm going home with no place to roam. It's alright. It's alright. It's alright. It's alright.